When my mom confesses to her friends that I'm dating another woman, they all respond with the same surprise. I didn't know that Eva was a lesbian. My mom's even more confused when she relays their responses back to me, and I reply, I'm not. Oh God, Eva, I'm so confused. At the start of my relationship with Julie, I'm 36 years old and with the first out woman I have ever dated, which means that I have to come out too. Even though my mother is supportive of my relationship and already loves Julie immediately, she's also very perplexed. I'm just not accustomed to two women being openly affectionate with each other, she says. I'm clearly happier than I've ever been with anyone I've ever dated, yet my mom still expresses concern for my well-being. I sit across from her, beaming from ear to ear, freshly in love, and she says, I just want you to be happy. I am, Mom. Well, I just want you to have an easy life. Have you looked at the statistics for life with a straight man lately? The infidelity, physical and mental abuse, the rates of divorce doesn't really sound too easy, Mom. Oh, Eva, you know what I'm talking about. I'm your mother. I'm just worried about you. And I do know what she means. She's thinking about the times to come, getting off a plane in any state besides New York and California, and being reminded with the first steps into the airport, oh, right, people here think that we're freaks. There will be many times while traveling when one or the other of us fear for our safety. Julie and I officially start dating in February of 2010. I've already booked a trip to my favorite little village on the Jamaican coast with friends. I keep dreaming about having her there with me. One of my favorite places on earth. We talk on the phone so often that I rack up a phone bill for $3,000. It's more than my mortgage. I could have paid for her to fly first class to stay with me and upgraded once she got here, but instead, we just keep whispering on the phone, is it really true? Are you my girlfriend? This is one of the legitimate downsides of dating another woman. A man would never stay on the phone that long. Anyway, this place I'm calling from, Treasure Beach, it's a place that from the very first time my feet hit the sand feels like home to me. The thought of spending time here with my new love is at first dreamy, until I imagine how we will be received, and immediately a sense of fear and dread takes me over. When I return home and express my concern to my therapist, who, by the way, also now thinks that I'm a lesbian, I tell her, I feel afraid to travel to some of my favorite places on earth because they no longer feel safe, and the last thing that I want to feel on vacation is scared. In the midst of my tears about my feeling of safety in the world being stripped away from me before my eyes, a light bulb goes off above her head and she exclaims, oh, you two could always go to Provincetown. Are you serious? Yes. Have you ever been? My husband and I love it there. We go every summer. Yes, I've been, but I'm talking to you about not being able to roam the planet freely, and your solution is a square mile of a 24/7 gay pride parade? Somehow I'm not reassured. Although I don't identify as a lesbian, I do identify as an alcoholic, and with relapse prevention in mind, Provincetown during the summer is not on my top 10 list of vacation spots. So later, she tells me in another session that her daughter has been given a questionnaire at school. And one of the questions is, do you know any same-sex couples? She goes on to explain that parents weren't informed that this question would be asked, and she feels that 6th grade is too early to introduce this kind of thing. She doesn't realize that what she's saying to me is, my daughter isn't old enough to know about people like you. I have to explain to her that I think same-sex couples should be introduced to babies at birth, and just like opposite-sex couples, the idea should be reinforced through all the grades starting in preschool so it can become normalized, not something that needs a level of maturity to understand. But like many, she's been thinking in her head about describing anal sex to a 6th grader, not having a conversation about love. I'm not offended by the comments. I know that like my mother, she cares about me and supports my new relationship, She just lacks exposure, and so she says really stupid shit sometimes. I just don't want to pay $125 an hour to explain things to her. I don't want to try to set her straight, no pun intended. I thank her for the great work that we've done together and tell her why I had to move on. She suggests that maybe I might want to see a lesbian therapist so that I can talk to someone who could relate. But I'm not a lesbian, I tell her, and it takes another $125 to explain that one. I don't need a lesbian therapist. Just like after 9/11, I didn't need a 9/11 therapist. I just needed someone who didn't say naive, ignorant shit about people who go through trauma. And besides, a lesbian therapist poses potential for a different kind of misunderstanding. How many sessions would I pay for to explain that I'm spending the rest of my life with a woman, but not a lesbian, confused, or in denial? I just don't have that kind of money. I'm not a lesbian, I'm not in denial, and I'm not confused. I'm just bisexual. I think perhaps by now in 2014, this topic is passé. Homosexuality hasn't been considered a mental illness since 1974. But last month, on the cover article of the New York Times Magazine was "The Scientific Quest to Prove Bisexuality Exists." There's actually a study going on to prove that I exist. That's nuts, especially considering that we may actually be the majority. Seriously, do you know how many married women are considered straight, but admit that if something were to happen to their husbands, they think they could just as easily end up with a woman or a man? Do you know how many men are considered straight, even though occasionally they sleep or fool around with men? They just don't call it bisexual. They call it drunk. Because God forbid they should be remotely gay. When I was openly dating men and secretly dating women, the logic of not coming out for all those years to my parents, to my employers, my coworkers, made sense to me at the time. The relationships with women were not officially committed relationships. My friends knew, but there didn't seem to be any real reason to tell my dad that I was with a woman if there wasn't any future for us. But more than anything, I was afraid of being judged. It led to a lot of untold stories, a lot of lying, and a lot of hiding. And while I loved many of the men that I was involved with, I did a lot of hiding behind them. I planned to be with Julie for the rest of my life. We're getting married in June. And when I was with my previous male partners, I was not straight. I was bisexual. And even spending the rest of my life with Julie, I am still who I am and have always been. It would be easy to welcome the identity of lesbian, even though it doesn't really fit me authentically. I'd have a lot less explaining to do. But from what I've learned, the best thing I can do for my relationship and myself is to be exactly who I am. And the last thing I want to do is use the love of my life to hide behind.